Reed Mallory hadn't fired a shot in 7 years, until they left his boy to freeze in the snow. Now he's got a loaded Colt, frost on his beard, and a message for every man who rode with that posse. Reed Mallory and his teenage son Jake shared a bond that ran deep like the roots of the sturdy oak trees lining their ranch. Every morning they would rise with the sun, breathing in the crisp, clean air of the open land they called home. The ranch was a sanctuary, a place where laughter echoed off the barn walls and the rhythm of hooves on the earth brought them joy. They spent countless afternoons tending to the horses, grooming their coats until they shone, and discussing everything from the best riding techniques to their dreams for the future. Reed had always been a hard worker, teaching Jake the values of loyalty and responsibility. They would often sit on the porch at sunset, sharing stories about Reed's younger years, when he rode with a wild spirit and faced challenges head-on. The tales of bravery and adventure sparked excitement in Jake's eyes, igniting his own dreams of becoming a skilled cowboy one day. Reed cherished these moments, recognizing that each story was not just a memory but a lesson for his son. The ranch buzzed with life. They were proud of their land, every blade of grass and every horse that roamed freely reflected their hard work. They had built something together, a life rich with purpose and connection. Neighborly visits were common. Friends would stop by for coffee or to lend a hand with chores. On those days, laughter would fill the air as they recounted tales of mishaps and triumphs, yet beneath this peaceful existence lay an undercurrent of uncertainty. Reed had heard whispers about changes in the town, rumors of corruption creeping through its heart. He dismissed them at first, hoping that such darkness could not touch their home. But as he watched Jake grow into a fine young man full of dreams and hopes, he couldn't shake off the looming shadows. Little did they know their tranquil life was about to be shattered by betrayal, setting in motion a series of events that would test their bond and reshape their lives forever. With the chill of winter approaching, it felt as if a storm was brewing on the horizon, a storm that would bring more than just snow. One fateful afternoon, the tranquility of the ranch shattered like glass. Reed was in the barn, checking the hay bales, when he heard raised voices outside. Curiosity piqued. He stepped out to see a group of men approaching, led by Sheriff Thompson, a man known for his heavy hand and glint of greed in his eyes. Reed's heart sank as he noticed the uneasy looks on his neighbors' faces. They seemed torn between loyalty and fear. The sheriff's voice boomed across the yard as he accused Jake of stealing a prized horse from a wealthy rancher in town. "That boy rode off with Darlene, and I'm here to take him in," Thompson declared, pointing a finger at Jake, who stood frozen in shock. The horse in question was a beautiful mare known for her speed, and Reed could barely comprehend how his son could be implicated in such a crime. "Jake would never do something like that," Reed shouted, stepping forward. "He's been here all day," but the sheriff was unyielding. His motives were clear. He wanted to make an example of someone, and Jake had become an easy target. Rumors had spread that the sheriff was working closely with the wealthy rancher. Taking down an innocent boy would fill his pockets with gold and silence any dissent in town. As Reed fought to protect his son, the sheriff's posse moved in closer, brandishing weapons and glaring at Jake as if he was already guilty. In that moment, fear twisted into rage within Reed's chest. He knew they were acting out of malice rather than justice. "This is wrong," he yelled, desperation spilling from his words. Instead of backing down, Thompson smirked and ordered his men to seize Jake. With tears welling in his eyes, Jake called out to his father for help as they dragged him away into the darkening storm. The winds howled angrily around them, mirroring Reed's turmoil. He felt a fire ignite deep within him, a fierce determination to confront this injustice head-on. It became clear that he wouldn't let them take away his son without a fight. In that chilling moment, Reed's world flipped upside down. Now it was survival against forces much larger than himself. The icy wind howled around Reed as he stood rooted to the spot, his heart racing with disbelief. How could this be happening? His son Jake was innocent, a hardworking boy with a good heart. The accusation felt like a knife piercing through his chest. As he watched the sheriff's posse drag Jake away, panic and fury clashed within him. "Stop! You can't do this!" Reed shouted, desperation lacing his voice. But Sheriff Thompson merely smirked, ignoring Reed's cries. The world around him blurred as he struggled to process the reality unfolding before him. He had always trusted that justice would prevail, but the corruption in town had poisoned that belief. Taking a deep breath, Reed turned toward the barn, searching for clarity amid the chaos. Memories of laughter and shared dreams flooded his mind, the times they spent training horses together and mapping out their future adventures. This wasn't just about clearing Jake's name, it was about protecting everything they had built together. Fueled by love and determination, he felt a fierce resolve take over. As he entered the barn, Reed's hands trembled. He reached for his old Colt revolver, feeling its weight bring him a sense of purpose. This wasn't just a weapon, it represented his fight for truth and justice. With every step back outside, he felt more like the man he once was, ready to face any challenge head-on. Reed glanced toward the horizon where dark clouds loomed overhead, mirroring his thoughts. He knew the storm would soon rage against him, but it no longer filled him with dread, it ignited a fire within him. With each passing moment, his disbelief transformed into an unyielding determination. No longer would he stand idly by while the sheriff abused his power. "Hang on, Jake," Reed whispered to himself as he mounted his horse and aimed into the blizzard. "I'm coming for you." With grit in his heart and vengeance in his veins, he rode into the unforgiving storm, ready to confront those who wronged them and reclaim his son's future. The battle had begun, and nothing would stop him from fighting for what was right. The air was thick with tension as Sheriff Thompson and his posse approached the Mallory ranch, their horses stomping through the snow like a marching army. Reed stood in the doorway, heart pounding, as he watched the men draw nearer. The sheriff's face was twisted into a cruel smirk, and the dark clouds overhead seemed to echo the storm brewing in Reed's heart. "Get off my land," Reed shouted, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. He stepped forward, ready to protect his son at all costs. Jake stood behind him, eyes wide with confusion and fear, trying to make sense of what was happening. Reed could feel the boy's uncertainty radiating from him, and it only fueled his resolve. "Your son is coming with us," Sheriff Thompson declared, his tone dripping with authority. "He's a thief, and I won't have any more of this nonsense from you or your family." The posse shifted uneasily, some glancing at each other as if unsure about their leader's orders. "Jake would never steal anything," Reed protested, anger surging through him. "He's a good boy, you can't just take him away like this." The sheriff waved a hand dismissively, signaling for his men to move in closer. Feeling trapped, Jake suddenly took a step back. "Dad," he called out, panic rising in his voice. His instincts kicked in, he knew they had to escape this madness. Without thinking, he turned and sprinted toward the barn, hoping to find shelter from the chaos outside. "Jake, no," Reed yelled, but it was too late. The posse had already begun to surround them. They were closing in on all sides like wolves ready to pounce on their prey. Reed felt the weight of desperation crash over him as he watched his son disappear into the shadows of the barn. "Don't let him get away," Thompson barked, spurring his horse forward. In that moment, everything spiraled out of control. Reed's heart raced as he realized that not only was the sheriff after Jake, but they would stop at nothing to bring him down. Reed pushed through the crowd of men blocking his path and rushed toward the barn, fury propelling him forward. He had to protect Jake. He couldn't let them take him into that storm, not when danger lurked so close at hand. The blizzard howled around them as chaos erupted. It was now a battle for survival against forces that wanted to tear their family apart. As Reed rode into the blizzard, the world around him was swallowed by swirling white chaos. The wind screamed like a wounded beast, tearing through the trees and setting off a flurry of snowflakes that stung his face like tiny arrows. Visibility plummeted, transforming the familiar landscape of his ranch into a cold, ghostly expanse. Each frozen gust mirrored the tumultuous emotions swirling within him: fear for Jake, rage toward the sheriff, and a crushing weight of helplessness that pressed down on his chest. The snow piled thicker with each passing moment, muffling sounds and erasing tracks behind him. Reed struggled to find clarity amid the fury of nature and the storm brewing in his heart. He tightened his grip on the reins, knuckles white against the leather as he urged his horse forward. Every hoofbeat felt like a declaration of war against fate. This was more than just an external battle against the elements. It was a reckoning with everything he had worked for. In that moment, Reed's senses heightened, drowning out the physical chill biting at his skin. Memories raced through him, laughter shared with Jake over stories of cowboy heroes and dreams of riding together under sunny skies. Now those dreams were buried beneath layers of snow, threatened by an oppressive darkness that loomed over them all. The storm outside echoed his inner turmoil. Just as snowflakes fell softly but relentlessly, so did feelings of anger, injustice, and fierce protectiveness cascade within him. Each step toward confronting Sheriff Thompson felt like climbing an insurmountable mountain, the weight of adversities pushed against him like the howling wind. Amidst the blizzard's fury, determination ignited in Reed's soul. He thought of Jake's terrified eyes, the way they pleaded for help. No amount of snow or wind would stop him from riding toward that darkness. He sought answers not just for himself, but to shield every aspiring dreamer from suffering at the hands of corrupt authority. Through icy pelts hitting his face and blinding flurries enveloping him, Reed held onto one undeniable truth: this storm would not be their end. As he pressed onward into the heart of the tempest, he embraced his resolve to confront Thompson and reclaim what was rightfully his, the safety of his son, and nothing could stand in his way. As Reed rode through the blizzard, the relentless wind whipped around him, but he couldn't allow himself to become distracted by the cold. Instead, he focused on the task at hand, bringing his son safely back home. The snowflakes danced wildly in the wind, yet amid all this chaos, a resolve began to crystallize within him. He knew he needed to prepare himself for what lay ahead. Reed pulled his horse to a stop, dismounting in a flurry of snow. He had a moment to gather his thoughts and brace himself for the confrontation he was about to face. He took a deep breath, forcing clarity into his mind amidst the confusion. Without hesitation, he reached for his old Colt revolver, still snugly resting in its worn leather holster. This weapon wasn't just an antique, it symbolized his transformation from a peaceful rancher to a man who would fight fiercely for his family. As Reed holstered the revolver at his side, he recalled the times it had hung in quiet anticipation above the hearth. It had seen days of laughter, shooting targets during summer afternoons, and outlaws during dusty cattle drives. But now it represented something far more significant: a father's readiness to defend his son against injustice. Strapping on the Colt felt like donning a suit of armor. With each click of the buckle, he felt more powerful and resolute. The chill of the air was matched only by the fire igniting in his heart. No longer would Reed allow fear or doubt to rule him. This was his moment. The sheriff had taken Jake away not just from him, but from everything they cared about. Reed's love for his son transcended any sense of normalcy. Nothing would stop him from taking action. With determination set firmly in his bones, Reed mounted his horse again. He felt the weight of the revolver at his side as not only a tool of defense, but as a reminder that this fight was for justice, not just for himself, but for every innocent soul who had suffered under Thompson's tyranny. He glanced once more at the swirling snow ahead, ready to face whatever challenges awaited him. With grit and purpose fueling him, Reed began to navigate through the storm toward the sheriff's lair, a place where he'd confront corruption head-on and reclaim his son from its grasp. As Reed pressed onward into the blizzard, the wind lashed at him like a relentless adversary, each gust biting through his coat and chilling him to the bone. The world around him was a swirling mass of white, every familiar landmark swallowed by the storm, leaving him feeling disoriented yet intensely focused. Within this chaotic landscape, his thoughts churned with vengeance and determination. Images of Jake's frightened face haunted him, urging Reed to push through the icy veil that threatened to engulf him. How could Sheriff Thompson have done this? What kind of man would take pleasure in tearing apart a family? The questions clawed at his mind, intensifying with each hoofbeat as he rode deeper into the storm. He felt an insatiable need for answers, a thirst that could only be quenched by confronting the sheriff directly. The cold seemed to seep into his bones, yet it did little to quell the fire burning in his heart. Reed was no longer just a simple rancher. He was now a man transformed by desperation and fury. Each moment spent battling both nature and his own emotions brought clarity, a clarity that sharpened his resolve. He was ready to fight for justice, not just for Jake, but for every soul who had ever suffered under Thompson's corrupt reign. As he navigated through the blinding snow, memories flooded back, happy moments shared with Jake on sunny days filled with laughter and adventure. Those memories fueled his anger, reminding him of what was at stake. Their dreams could not be extinguished so easily. The thought of losing everything ignited an unquenchable fire within him, pushing him forward despite the fierce storm. The howling wind roared in his ears as Reed tightened his grip on the reins and steered his horse deeper into the heart of the blizzard. He knew every second counted. He had to reach Thompson before it was too late. With each stride through the thickening snow, Reed's thoughts transformed from fear to vengeance. He would no longer stand idly by while injustice reigned. The storm raged on around him, but it became less of a physical barrier and more of a catalyst for Reed's fury. This chaotic dance with nature reflected the tempest brewing inside him as he prepared to confront those who had wronged them. With grit in his heart and a fierce determination guiding him, he pressed onward into uncertainty, knowing that only one path lay ahead: justice for Jake at any cost. As Reed rode through the blizzard, he knew he had to gather support in town if he ever hoped to challenge Sheriff Thompson effectively. The cold winds whipped around him, but despite the storm's fury, he felt a flicker of hope. He had friends in town, people who had shared laughter and struggles with him over the years. With a heart full of determination, he set his sights on the nearest settlements where he hoped to find allies. When Reed arrived at Miller's general store, he pushed open the door, the jingle of the bell cutting through the howling wind. Inside, a few townsfolk gathered, eyes widening as they recognized Reed's worn and determined face. "Reed!" one of them exclaimed, but the warmth in their greeting quickly faded into unease as they recalled his reason for being there. "I need your help," Reed said, voice steady but urgent. "Jake, been wrongfully accused by Sheriff Thompson, and I can't do this alone." He scanned their faces, looking for any signs of support. Some murmured in agreement and shook their heads sympathetically, while others cast sideways glances toward the door, clearly fearful of getting involved. One elderly man finally spoke up. "You know how Thompson is, Reed. I'd love to help you, but his fear runs deep in these parts. He controls this town." Reed felt a pang of disheartenment wash over him but pressed on. "We can't let fear rule us anymore. We have to stand up against this injustice for Jake." He could see the internal struggle flickering in their expressions as they weighed their options. Moments later, two men stepped forward. "We're with you," they said firmly. Reed's heart surged at their bravery, a flicker of courage that might ignite more among the townspeople. But just then, another voice emerged from the back, a voice trembling with fear. "What if he comes after us? He won't stop at just your son." That sentiment echoed through the room like a chill running down Reed's spine. Fear held many captive here. With that reality hanging heavy in the air, Reed faced each individual in the room, underscoring his plea with sincerity. Standing by in fear will only empower him further. If we unite against this corruption together, if we stand strong for what's right, we can protect not only Jake but ourselves. The tension swirled like snowflakes outside, a mix of hope and uncertainty overshadowing them all. Reed knew that not everyone would follow him into the storm. It was a grim truth he had to accept, but those who stood at his side reinforced his belief that justice was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. As Reed approached the sheriff's lair, the snowstorm raged around him like a living entity, seemingly conspiring against him. He could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on his shoulders, but he pressed on, knowing that the moment of reckoning was near. With every hoofbeat echoing in his mind, Reed prepared himself for the confrontation that awaited him. When he finally reached the clearing near Thompson's hideout, Reed spotted the posse gathered around a flickering fire, their faces illuminated by its glow. They were laughing and drinking, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond their camp. Reed's heart raced as he took cover behind some nearby trees, watching intently. He could see Sheriff Thompson among them, leaning back with a smug grin, clearly reveling in his twisted sense of power. Reed steeled himself. He couldn't hide forever. He pulled out his Colt revolver, feeling the familiar weight settle in his hand, a symbol of his unwavering commitment to protecting Jake. As he stepped out into the clearing, the laughter from the posse abruptly ceased, replaced by tense silence as they turned to face him. "What do you want, Mallory?" Thompson sneered, crossing his arms as if daring Reed to approach. "You really think you can take on my men?" "I'm here for my son," Reed shouted back, voice steady and resolute. "You've wronged him and torn my family apart. I won't let this go on any longer." The members of the posse shifted uneasily, some exchanging glances filled with doubt. Reed felt an adrenaline rush. This was it, the showdown he had been preparing for. Thompson laughed dismissively. "Your boy is a thief. You're wasting your time here." With a deep breath, Reed took a step forward. "If you think I'm going to let you get away with this corruption and fear-mongering, you're mistaken." In an instant, tensions ignited like dry kindling catching fire. One of Thompson's men drew his weapon, aiming it squarely at Reed as the others stepped back instinctively. "You're outnumbered," he warned. Reed stood tall despite the danger closing in around him. "Outnumbered or not, I'll fight for Jake. I'll fight for anyone who dares to challenge this injustice." With that declaration echoing through the night air, Reed raised his Colt slightly higher, ready to defend himself and make a stand against tyranny, fearless and resolute in his pursuit of truth. The blizzard howled around them as if urging both sides to confront their destinies head-on. In that moment, Reed knew there would be no turning back. This was a battle for everything he held dear. The air was thick with tension as Reed stepped into the clearing, the blizzard howling around him like a wild beast. Sheriff Thompson leaned against a nearby tree, his posse forming a semicircle behind him, weapons drawn and expressions eager for confrontation. Reed could sense their anticipation, the thrill of violence pulsing through the group as they prepared for what could soon become a deadly standoff. "Look who finally decided to show up," Thompson sneered, his grin wide and mocking. "You really thought you could come here and get your son back? You're in way over your head, Mallory." Reed clenched his jaw, feeling the weight of every word Thompson spat. "This isn't just about Jake anymore. It's about all of you who have allowed this corruption to fester in this town," he replied, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. "I know what you've been doing, that you've turned a blind eye to the truth as you fill your pockets with dirty money." Laughter erupted from the posse, but Reed could see uncertainty flicker across some of their faces. Thompson's bravado faltered for just a moment, and Reed seized that opportunity. "You may have the power now, but I won't back down. I will expose you for the coward you are." Thompson's expression shifted to one of anger, and he took a step forward, fists clenched. "You think you can threaten me? You're just a washed-up rancher. No one cares about your sob story." "I care," Reed shot back, his heart racing with adrenaline. "And there are others who care too. You've pushed us long enough. We're not going to let fear keep us quiet anymore." The storm echoed Reed's defiance as wind whipped around them, amplifying his resolve. But Thompson's men remained tense, many glancing nervously at their leader, unsure of where this confrontation might lead. In an instant, the atmosphere snapped as one of the posse members pointed his gun directly at Reed. "You're making a mistake. You can't take on the sheriff alone." Reed's grip tightened around his Colt, determination flooding his veins. "Then let this be your choice. The law you've upheld is built on lies. Stand with me or stand aside." With those words hanging in the air like an explosive charge, Reed knew he had crossed a line. The sheriff's facade began to crack, revealing the deep-seated corruption that fueled their oppression. This was more than just a fight for Jake. It was a reckoning with the very heart of injustice that had plagued their lives for too long. With fierce determination blazing in his eyes and thunder rumbling in the distance, Reed stood ready, prepared to confront whatever came next in this clash of wills against tyranny. He wouldn't just fight for himself. He would fight for every wronged soul beneath this wicked rule. In that moment, he knew there was no turning back, and every ounce of fear had transformed into sheer resolve. The blizzard began to settle as the confrontation came to an end, leaving Reed reeling from the weight of what had just transpired. The air was still charged with tension, but the shouts and gunfire had dwindled into an unsettling silence. He glanced around, eyes scanning the remnants of the standoff, the sheriff's posse, some hastily retreating into the swirling snow, others nursing wounds from the fight that had erupted. Reed felt a mix of triumph and dread wash over him. In this aftermath, as adrenaline faded, he turned his focus on Sheriff Thompson, who lay on the ground, clutching his side where a bullet had grazed him. The once arrogant man now stared up at Reed with a mix of fear and defiance. "You think you've won?" Thompson spat through gritted teeth. "This isn't over. I'll ruin you for this." Reed took a step closer, heart pounding with the revelation that his fight was far from finished. "You've already ruined yourself. I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows the truth," he said, his voice calm but firm. He realized then that it wasn't just about Jake. It was about exposing the corruption that had festered for too long. As he surveyed the remaining members of the posse, Reed noticed a few lingering back, exchanging uneasy glances. Some regarded him with newfound respect, yet others wore expressions of dissent. Fear held them firmly in Thompson's grasp. These were men he'd known for years, men he thought he could trust. "Will you stand with me?" Reed called out, desperation tinged with hope. "Or will you let fear control your lives?" But only silence met his plea, and Reed's heart sank as he saw friends he had counted on turn away in shame and fear. It became clear that some would always bow to tyranny while others would rise against it. This realization cut deeper than any blade. Betrayal was not just from strangers but from those he had cherished. With determination solidifying in his spirit, Reed turned away from Thompson and the remaining posse. He had fought for justice today, but it was now evident that many more battles awaited him, not just against Thompson but against the ingrained fear that shackled the town and its people. As the snow continued to fall softly around him, Reed mounted his horse with a new purpose. He would stand for Jake and for all those who were too afraid to speak out. The fight was far from over. It was only just beginning, and Reed knew that with each step forward, he would unearth more truths and face more betrayals along the way. The path ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to walk it, armed not only with his Colt but also with an unwavering resolve to break the cycle of corruption once and for all. As the days passed, the blizzard's grip on the land slowly began to loosen, revealing patches of earth that had been hidden beneath layers of snow. Reed Mallory stood outside his ranch, watching as the last remnants of winter melted away under a reluctant sun. The air was fresh and crisp, but it brought with it an unsettling quiet, a stark reminder of all that had transpired. The confrontation with Sheriff Thompson still echoed in Reed's mind, replaying moments of tension and betrayal that would forever alter his perspective. He felt both victorious and hollow. While he had stood up for justice, the emotional scars of the fight lingered like shadows in the corners of his heart. The town may have begun to see glimpses of truth, but the battle against fear and corruption was far from finished. Reed took a deep breath as he walked toward the barn, where memories of laughter with Jake now seemed to linger like ghostly whispers. He thought about how quickly life could change, how their dreams were nearly shattered by greed and malice. His love for his son surged within him, mingling with deep-seated anger towards those who had betrayed them. Sitting on a hay bale, Reed reflected on what it meant to protect family. It wasn't just about facing dangers head-on. It was also about standing strong for ideals that mattered most: honor, trust, and community. Many in town had turned away when faced with fear, yet he understood that some loyalties ran deeper than blood. Others were simply too scared to act. With a heavy heart, he resolved to be a beacon for those who remained silent. He imagined holding town meetings under the old oak tree again, inviting people to share their stories and confront their fears together. The cycle of oppression would only end if they united against it. As sunlight streamed through the barn doors, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, Reed felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. While painful truths had been revealed, some from friends turned foes, the fight for justice had opened new paths toward healing. Determined more than ever, Reed stood up and patted his Colt at his side, a reminder that while he would always be ready to defend what was right, true strength also lay in fostering courage among others. With renewed purpose flooding through him like spring thawing winter's chill, he stepped out into the warming sun, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in rebuilding not just his family, but also the fractured community around him.